Yesterday we talked about everything except for vertical and adjacent angles. So quickly we're going to talk about those. So we're actually going to go to adjacent angles first. So adjacent angles, our definition is going to be this. It's a little long, so make sure you write small. When lines intersect, and intersect is a fancy word for when they cross, two angles that are next to each other are supplementary, meaning they equal 180 degrees. So adjacent angles mean angles that are next to each other when lines cross. So I'm going to draw a picture. If you can draw a picture on your flap, that would help you so you have these in your notes. So I have two lines that cross each other. When these two lines cross each other, we're going to create four angles. I'm going to label them 1, 2, 3, and 4. The two angles that are next to each other, so they share a common side and a vertex. So for example, 1 and 2, they are supplementary, meaning they would equal 180 degrees. Same thing would be true about 4 and 3. They're next to each other, meaning they're adjacent. And if we added them together, they would equal 180 degrees. Also, 1 and 4 and 3 and 2 are also adjacent. So adjacent angles happen when two lines cross or intersect, and then the angles that are next to each other are called adjacent. Next, we're going to talk about vertical angles. So we're going to go back up. We're going to talk about vertical angles. So open that flap up. Vertical angles, same thing happens. So it happens when you have two intersecting lines. And when you have two intersecting lines, angles that are across from each other, let me get my pen back up. Angles that are across from each other those are called vertical. So angles that are across from each other, and they are always congruent, meaning they are equal. So if I drew a picture and I labeled this 1, 2, 3, and 4, angle 1 and angle 3 are across from each other. They are congruent, or they're the same. Angles 4 and angles 2 are across from each other. They are congruent, or they are the same. Let's do a couple more practice ones. You don't have to write this down unless you want to. So 1, 2, 3, and 4 are my angles. If I said name a pair of vertical angles, that would be angles that are across from each other. So 4 and 2 are across from each other. If the measure of angle 4 was 55 degrees, that would mean that 2 is also 55 degrees because they're vertical across from each other, they're congruent. Let's do another one. Let's say I have intersecting lines and they look like this. And I have my angles. Angles 1 and 2 would be called adjacent, and they're adjacent because adjacent means they're next to each other. So if they're next to each other, that means that they are going to equal 180 degrees, or they're supplementary. So if this one is 80 degrees, that would mean this one is 100 degrees. If I wanted to know what angles 3 and angles 4 are, 2 and 4 are across from each other, so that means this would be 80, and that would mean this one would be 100 because it's across from 1. Vertical and adjacent.